but like I feel like I go through socks more than
What are
any
your
other.
floors made of? Do you just like step
Well,
on razor blades all day?
it's better than at my old apartment. My old apartment, the floors were all fucked up, but now it's better.
Okay. Well,
Yeah.
that is now part of Tap Calf canon forever.
Oh, sweet, awesome.
All right. Hello there, everyone. Welcome to another edition of Tap Calf Transmissions, the only Star Wars podcast, which also covers all topics socks. I am Corey, joined once again by another guest to replace Justin while he is away on his paternity leave, which I don't know how long he gets paternity leave in the podcasting industry. We have really good benefits on the podcast, but taking his place is his editor and the person in charge of Professor X, the Marvel Clips channel that Eck runs, is Zack. Zack, how are you doing today?
Hey, I'm doing great, except for the fact that I had to cram this not very good book in a week.
Okay, so this week, I know at the end of last week I said we'd be talking about some Marvel Star Wars comics, but I asked Zach after finishing the podcast with Ilkin last week, is there something else you'd want to talk about? Do you want to do the Marvel stuff still, or do you want to do a book? And so Zach chose that we'd be talking about today's subject, which is Heir to the Jedi, which has the most romance novel. I don't have a physical copy of it. I don't think. No, I don't have a physical copy of it. Okay, you do.
Fair.
Perfect. It is the most romance novel looking cover, so the audio listeners won't be able to see the wonderful cover you just held up, but it's like Luke chest stuck out. He's going for the 70s novel cover look. And it
Very
is
Fabio.
yeah. So
Yep.
it's very it's a got a lot of romance going on in it. But this is actually one of the earliest new canon books, and it was technically written expected to be a Legends novel. So
Yeah,
there's a lot of Legends references.
it was supposed to be like the third in a trilogy that never capped off, where each book was looking at a different character. It was like there was a Leia novel, a Han novel, and this was supposed to tie them all together.
Yeah, so the Han novel was Scoundrels, I believe. I think it was Scoundrels. But
Sounds right.
I'm not sure what the Leia novel was. And I'm not sure if the Leia novel actually came out. But I think it was, and it turned into a duology on the Legend side, and then we have this as kind of a standalone canon novel about Luke between episodes 4 and 5.
So the Leia novel is called Razor's Edge.
Okay, so
That
it's
did
that
come
one.
out, and the Han novel is Honor Among Thieves.
Okay, it's not Scoundrels. Okay, so technically not a trilogy anymore, but really they all still go together. Uh, but yeah, so this novel is set like the other ones between episode 4 and 5, kind of as a character focused novel for each one of the main trio. And so one of the weird parts of the book is that it's done in first person perspective from Luke's perspective, and he's dealing with some very I guess he's what 22 during the book, I think, because I think it's 2 years after
He's
Yavin, so 21, 22.
I couldn't really get a good idea of when this was supposed to be set. It's either immediately after Yavin or like right before Empire Strikes Back, because they make references to Hoth.
Yeah, I think he does explicitly say it's been like 2 years since he's been doing this, and he's like dealing with the expectations after Yavin, where like the entire galaxy seems to know it's Luke Skywalker who blew up the Death Star. Uh, and Luke is still coming into his Jedi powers. He really doesn't have many powers yet, and the author's note at the end is basically he Kevin Hearn, the author, had watched Empire Strikes Back, and he'd always been wondering when Luke pulls the lightsaber to him, when and how did he learn how to do that? And he's basically writing the novel explaining how Luke developed some of those earlier powers. But it it reads a lot to me, and I don't know if you'll feel the same, but it reads almost like an RPG situation where there's like 4 fetch quests before he gets to do the main story quest. He had to level up his ship, his mount before he's able to get in there.
Nope, that's pretty accurate. The way I was describing it to my girlfriend, who's not a Star Wars fan, was it was like somebody had 5 different ideas for Star Wars books, and then
Hmm.
they had to fit them all into this book.
Yeah, like there's I'd say 3 or 4 distinct sections. Like the last 2 sections tie together. The first 2 sections are kind of like their own little individual missions. And it's not a long book. Like it's 250 pages. So you kind of spend the first I'd say I think it's about the first 100 pages doing 2 separate jobs. And it kind of feels like, oh, well, are we just doing like 5 or 6 different ones of these and that's just going to be what the book is? But
Yeah, it's pretty aimless in the beginning.
yeah, I was enjoying it by the end actually, but the first 150 pages for me were tough. I'm not gonna lie.
Yeah, I like the idea of like the second mission he goes on where it's like the sci-fi horror element of it. But I think it would
Mhm.
be interesting if that was an entire book on its own
Yeah,
and it didn't involve a character that we know is going to make it out of the situation.
yeah. Like there's almost a Forrest Gump quality to it, where we're just seeing Luke go through all these situations where like there's some interesting parts to each of the situations, but it's never really given enough focus. But I guess we'll go through kind of part by part and we'll maybe divide it into those 4 sections. But before we get into that, there was a big piece of Star Wars news that came out this week in that we have an Ahsoka trailer. So did you have any, I don't want to go too deep into it, but any overall thoughts about what you saw from Ahsoka?
I think it looks pretty awesome. I I think I'm still kind of iffy on the way Thrawn looks in live action. I just there's certain parts of it where it's like, yeah, they do have to make a blue-skinned, red-eyed person work in live action, but also I don't know, it just looks slightly off to me. I wonder if it will go away as we get more footage of him, but what do
Yeah.
you think about that?
Like the shot from the back looks really good. The shot from the
Yeah, I
front
think
is
so
just such a
too.
limited amount to work off of. It's not like the best angle to begin with. Because like part of it is just everyone thinks he looks like Elon Musk in that shot, which
Yeah.
is like that's going to take a lot of the focus and make it look weird no matter what. But I feel like once we have a bit more of him in action, it won't be. I think it'll be fine. I do think there's a bit of exaggerated quality to a lot of the costumes in it, like uh any of the like rank insignia and all that. They feel like they're bigger and a bit simpler than they'd be in other shows. And I think part of that is trying to translate a bit of the Rebel style into live action. So I've seen some people talk about like, oh, this looks so cheap, or how could they not get the costumes right? But I think part of it is an intentional move of like, this is kind of a follow up on Rebels, and it looks less gritty on the costume side than say Mandalorian does.
Yeah, I agree with that. I actually wrote an XClip video about the Rebels comparison and how Sabine's mural looks exactly like it did in the show. And my takeaway was basically that it's kind of like Rebels, the designs and everything was Sabine's telling of the story, which is why her style bleeds through to that show and
Hmm.
why there can be differences in the way it looks.
Yeah. So I saw a lot of people that were annoyed by the mural and like saying, "Oh, the Rebels one looks so much better. How did they mess this up?" It's like
It
I
looks exactly the
yeah, it
same.
there's differences, but it's basically the Office meme. Like it's the same fucking picture.
Yeah.
But yeah, so I don't know. But I thought it looked really cool. It's nice to see the E-wing in live action in a way that isn't going to get Eck canceled for not even thinking about the fact that he was just pointing at Sabine's ass. Like it really we've talked about this on the show before, but like you're in the chat that he sent it in. He sent the picture. He's like, Corey, do you see what I see? And like it's clear, like looking back now, it's obvious that it's the two of us looking at this picture with the E-wing in the background, and then it's just Sabine's ass is front and center. But
Yeah.
both of us were just like, that's the E-wing. Of course, this picture is of the E-wing.
I
But when
think
Eck
that
put that up, I started seeing people being like, "Yeah, Eck is just clickbaiting. He just wanted the butt shot up front." It's like, no, we just
I think
E-wing.
that morning was, like, the day after a drunk stream too, so I woke
Yeah,
up hungover, looked at it, and I was like, "Wow, that's a very Charlie-esque photo to put in the group chat right now."
like it literally neither of us even slightly were thinking about that. It's just like it's the E-wing.
No, looking back at it, yeah, I should have figured that. But yeah, I really like that sequence that we get, like that brief little. It's almost like a Top Gun sequence with
Yeah,
Sabine riding the yeah, and I really like that idea where it's we get the homages to films from the 80s in Ahsoka the same way we got them in the original trilogy, and I just really
yeah.
like that's continuing because I think it's been absent for a little while. I mean, Mandalorian does have some of the spaghetti western homages thrown in that here and there, but I don't know. I'm always as a film nerd, I'm really glad to see those things in there.
Yeah, like I do kind of wonder if we'll see Ahsoka flying one of the E-wings because she's wearing one of the flight suits, like the New
Mhm.
Republic flight suits in one of the shots. So I don't know if she's going to be chasing Sabine. Like something's happened between them off screen between Rebels and Ahsoka. This is like attempt two at bringing them together. So I'm looking forward to seeing what that turns into.
Yeah, I
Uh,
think it's gonna be really do you think we're gonna get a lot of flashbacks to that period in between?
I don't know if we'll get a lot of flashbacks to it because it seems like there's going to be enough to be doing in the modern day. So, like, maybe a couple scenes once we've established that Ahsoka and her had been together. Like, I think that's kind of what the line that Sabine says about like "you were hard on me" is going to kind of set up for.
Yeah.
But yeah,
I was thinking we would probably get, like, a spin-off novel at some point
yeah,
that details that period.
yeah, that's probably a safe bet. But speaking of spin-off novels, we have a spin-off novel from Star Wars: A New Hope called Heir to the Jedi, and the we kind of set up what's going on a bit here already. It's like Luke is going out and doing some fetch quests for the Rebel Alliance. The first one he's doing is going to Rhodia, and he is going to be trying to set up some contacts with some like Rhodian weapon smugglers slash manufacturers that the Alliance can buy from. So he goes through a few planets. Like he goes to Lonic first and frees a shuttle that is going to turn out to be pretty important before getting to Rhodia. But it's a quick sequence of just like 50 pages that covers the entire Rhodia trip. So a few things happen in it. But what was your impression of the book once you were in the thick of the Rhodians?
So, first of all, I thought it was just a weird mission to send Luke on. It
Yeah.
seemed much more like a Leia mission, so after I got through that, I did like all of the detailing of Luke exploring the Jedi tomb on Rhodia. I thought that was like really interesting, and those are my favorite aspects of the book is Luke actually learning about the Jedi Order.
Yeah, there really isn't that much of him learning about it, and I thought like setting up with Hulik and Luke learning about Hulik, which is the Rhodian Jedi whose tomb he gets to visit. I thought we were setting up for that being a bigger focus of the kinds of things we'd be doing in the book, but
Mhm.
it's really more about like Luke coming to terms with how he can use his power. So this is he gets a lightsaber, like he just grave robs a lightsaber from this Rhodian Jedi.
He got permission.
I mean, he got permission from someone, not from Hulik.
Yeah.
Like Hulik's only niece who still cares about him is basically what it is. But like after we read Scourge last week, me and Ilkin, I was thinking like, oh, there's a Rhodian heavy couple weeks, especially if we're dealing with like this trip to Rhodia and setting up Rhodian contacts with the Rebel Alliance. But then he leaves and that doesn't really come back.
Yeah. Like I said, it's like 4 or 5 different books all put into the 300 pages that Heir to the Jedi actually is, which also, what do you think of that title?
I mean, it's like
It's
a an heir to the
it
Empire reference, I guess, but like
yeah, it's pretty on the nose.
yeah, I don't know. It didn't give me like that plus the cover didn't give me the best impression going in, and then like the opening parts of the book were it just felt kind of haphazard going in. So like
Yeah.
none of those were helping my impression in the early goings.
Did you see the Brazilian cover of the book?
I did not,
It
and
is a
this
1,000 times better than what we got.
what's it look like? What's the difference? What are the
It's well, it's
highlights?
a completely different cover. It first of all, it actually shows Nakari on there.
Okay, so that's
Um,
where her art's from. Because I did see a
yes.
picture of Nakari, which is the woman who's going to be going with Luke on one of his adventures. Oh, that's not the picture that I saw. I guess there must be another
I
picture of
think
her.
there's another one because you also see the other character that they end up.
Russell?
Yes, you see them on the cover also, which interesting character design there.
What, you're not a fan of the Given?
Well, it's just kind of the ghost face mask from Scream.
Yeah. Well,
I mean, it's
that's
all
how
right.
Given have always been. Have you
Yeah.
they're a long standing Star Wars staple. The and I actually really liked how the Given were handled in this. Like I enjoyed Drusilla as a character. I think like having the math communication is just weird enough. Like it's a good balance for a Star Wars alien where the math is a core part of how they communicate and interact with the world, and I don't care if it makes sense or not,
Yeah.
but like it's something that's sufficiently alien while still not shoehorning it into a type of personality. Like you can
Hmm.
have them communicating in this different way, seeing the world in this different way, but it's not like this is the species that's polite or this is the smuggler species. Like sure they're the math species, but Drusel could still be the evil kind of math species or the good kind of math species. You can have a personality on top of that.
It reminds me of a Star Trek thing. More, I get that vibe from them.
Do you? Because I feel like Star Trek's
Yeah.
usually worse for that. Of like, this is this the planet of like the red hat people or whatever the thing is, where like they're all the same.
I just mean like that the quirk, I guess, where
Okay.
it's like it's like this group of individuals uses math as like this form of not only communication but also trust.
Yeah, like in some ways it's similar to what I think is the worst episode I've seen of Star Trek, the Darmok and Jalad thing, which is apparently my most cancelable take. Because whenever I say I hate that episode, any Star Trek fans that I talk to or am friends with are like, "How could you dislike it?" No, I fucking hate that episode. But yeah, I feel like it's not as limiting for the rest of the characters as or characteristics. That's why
Yeah.
I like it.
I also listened to the audiobook and I think the voice that they give them is horrible.
I feel like if you're
It's
doing a given voice, you make some sort of like sucking sound, and like you can't talk about like
I
that kind of
mean, you're
thing.
not far off.
Okay, so
Yeah.
I should just do some Star Wars audiobooks.
Yeah, no, that's exactly what I'm telling you.
Cool. All right. Well, we get the contacts with the Rhodians. They've got their weapon stores set up. The rebels are going to be able to buy from them. And I don't. Does that come up again? Like they don't successfully manage to buy from the Rhodians. They
No,
just bring
all
the
that
contacts back to the rebels, and he plays with the lightsaber a little bit. But even the lightsaber doesn't really
yeah,
do much.
the the big moment that deals with going to Rhodia is when Luke intervenes in the firefight when he gets out of hyperspace at Lalanic.
Yeah, yeah. So like that happens before even getting to Rhodia. So like he
Yeah.
fused the Kupafon freighter, which sets up a situation where the Kupafon feel really grateful. Luke is getting back to the fleet at Ordo Platonia, which is in the Pantora system. So the first he's apologizing, saying like, "Oh, I didn't mean to compromise my mission, but I couldn't let them just die." And Leia and Akbar, who were just like running around together the whole time, are like, "No, it's great, buddy. They're really grateful. They've given us some information about a bounty on this great S tier slicer, Drusel Barafon or Befarin, not Barafon, and we're gonna rescue her. So we're gonna rescue her. We're gonna reunite her with her family on this planet that has a bunch of giant evil squids and stuff that even Akbar is afraid of, and it'll be great. But if they're gonna do that, they need money and supplies, and the way they're going to get this is Luke is teaming up with Nakari Cowan, who he flirted with a bit at the start of the book before going off on his mission because he's been using her ship, the Desert Jewel, and they're gonna go visit her father first because her father is loaded and will be able to give them some money that the Rebel Alliance doesn't have sitting around.
Yeah, and then that's how we get into our first side quest. Well, technically second
Second,
side
yeah,
quest,
because
but
this is the one you really liked. Of
I liked conceptually. I didn't like
oh,
the
okay.
actual execution
I'm
of
sorry.
it.
I don't want to oversell this for you. Then
Well, so it has the skull borers in there,
yes, the
which I think is
guests. I think
yes.
no, that would the guest is the one on Rhodia. It's something else.
It
I don't know if they
it's
named them.
Phyrexian skull borers
Yeah,
is what they end up calling them, but
real
I
original.
think it's yeah, it's super original, but I think it's like an interesting idea where they could have taken like just two brand new characters and had them explore in like a survival horror setting, but with it being Luke, I don't feel that sense of dread that something bad is going to happen to him. And Nakari you just met, I think they kind of toy with the idea that maybe she's not totally loyal to the rebellion yet.
Yeah,
They
I
didn't get
hated
into
that.
her backstory yet, did they?
Not really. Well, we kind of did because we get to Pasher before we go to Fex. So dealing with her dad, you get a bit more of her backstory, and I think the stuff with her mom isn't explained yet.
Yeah, I thought
But
that happened
yeah, I
afterwards.
think that's when they're noodling on Dinon.
Yeah.
But there is a bit that comes with her dad where like her dad seems kind of a dick, but then he says nice things afterwards and does like he does. So we're from the same area, and I feel like I know a lot of small business owners that act exactly like this guy does, only like
Yeah.
slightly less cartoonishly. Like they'll say something nice, but also just like ream into you for like no reason because they think it's funny, and then they
Yeah.
like throw a bunch of money at stuff, and it's like okay,
I had a boss at a convenience store who was this exact character,
yeah,
except, replace the rude things he says with racial slurs and just like, oh, this guy's a fucking asshole, but I guess we're just gonna deal with it.
yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, and I feel like both of the rich characters, like there's this guy, and then later on Kupafon, there's Azur Nessin. They're kind of the same guy. Like they feel like the same character. I don't know. It might just be that the characterization in this book as a whole is kind of weak, where a lot of
Yeah.
people kind of feel interchangeable and like they have similar personalities, which isn't great when it's a first person Luke book, where it doesn't always feel like Luke. Sometimes it feels kind of like Luke.
Yeah.
Sometimes
You
it
can
doesn't.
swap out a lot of the pronouns, I think, with he or instead of I, just it seems like it was done very last minute. Like, oh, we're gonna make this the first Star Wars novel that's written in the first person from Luke's perspective. Like, just to have something to throw on the back of the book, basically.
I I don't know if I got that feeling from it. Like I feel like it's kind of important to what they're doing of like I can see coming up with the concept for the book of like exploring how Luke feels about the Force and all that, and thinking that first person is the best way to do that. And I think that makes sense. But
Yeah.
I think the way that Luke talks and thinks and his characterization as far as that goes doesn't hold up a lot. Like there's certain things where it's like, okay, you needed someone to say this thing, and now Luke is saying this thing or thinking this way, and it doesn't feel like it's him. And part of that is with the like how Leia's not trusting Nakari, how Luke isn't trusting Drusel, and that never really comes into it very much. Like there's some slightly tense conversations that the characters have, but like it just feels like it's a distraction whenever it came up. Is like, okay, this isn't what this book is really about.
Yeah, like we have to have some conflict really quick.
Yeah, and it just I never really got the feeling that it was going to go anywhere. So I was like, okay, why are we wasting our time on this?
Yeah. I
Like
think it could have been interesting if Nakari. Well, what did you think of Nakari as a character?
I thought she was fun, but then like it was a good sounding board for Luke, but it also was like, okay, so you invented this female character who mostly just exists to be like interested in Luke romantically and then not be too upset when she finds out that Luke is interested in Leia and then she explodes.
Yeah, it's I just didn't think they had any chemistry too, really.
Yeah, she
Like the
doesn't seem like the kind of person that would really be a good match for Luke, but I guess like
it's just
Mara's
like, oh,
very
we
different,
both
but
we both grew up on desert planets, so we're meant to be together, I guess.
yeah, they have some of the shared trauma with like their moms and stuff, but like the romantic connection seems I guess like they're both what 22 probably I was saying, and I don't know, you just stick them alone together and they think each other are attractive enough, and then that's kind of just what their hormones are doing. But it
I Yeah, I agree. I do like the backstory that her mother was a musician, though, that wrote a Vader protest song.
yeah, or even like a Vader parody song. I
Yeah,
wasn't
I
clear if it
mean,
was a parody or a protest or both, but
I took a note of what it was called. The song is called Vader's Many Prosthetic Parts.
okay, yeah. So yeah, Vader didn't take kindly to that. Sent her off to the spice mines of Kessel. She did, as far as we know.
Yeah, she's been there for 10 years, I think she
Yeah.
says, like somewhere in that ballpark. And Luke explicitly says, like, oh, yeah, nobody lasts more than 1 year, so that's got to be
See,
it.
I don't think that's true. I think a lot of people last a lot longer than that.
Yeah, as far as we know, her mother is still alive.
Yeah, but she's not anymore, so there's
Yeah.
nothing anyone can do about that. Like it just felt like okay, you're setting up this relationship and then you got to kill her off because now this character only exists to be a love interest for Luke and a source of funding for Luke's adventure. Where like some
Well,
of the interactions between them could be fun, but
I don't
no.
mind the noodle interaction. I think that one is all
Yeah.
right.
Yeah, but then he does that basically with Drusel as well. He's
Yeah, and
cheating
it's a
on her.
lot more it's much more successful.
Yeah. But
I
he'd
don't
already
mind
had that foundation. So they're on Denon getting their noodles after they've come back from Fex and they've got their funding from her mom, and so they got the ship set up. They're going to Denon because there's a noodle shop they need to go to get the information about how to get Drusel and pick up Drusel. Uh, and they, of course, they eat the noodles as well. And Luke's first forced telekinesis is shifting a noodle with his eyes closed
I
towards
was
her.
confident she was lying to him the
Me
first time
too.
I read this. I was like, she's blowing smoke up his ass right now.
Yeah.
But
'Cause-
also it gives me my favorite line in the book, which is the cheesiest line of dialogue. Despite the loss of a few degrees of heat, those were the best noodles I've ever had.
there were some funny lines in here, like the when they're setting up the passphrase to get in at the hotel on that's on Kupafon, I think. Yeah, because they're waiting for their ship to be fixed on Kupafon.
Yes.
And so Drusel's staying in their hotel room while uh, Luke and Nakari are out exploring and looking for like ISB agents that might be hunting for them. So they want to set up a passphrase at the hotel room, and we get an equation that if you do first outside, inside, last, turns into plan the word plan, but foiled. So it a nice grade 12 or grade 10 math joke in there, which I showed Dana because she likes math. She thought it was hilarious, and I told her given were cute. So she was like, "Oh, is this just like my new favorite Star Wars species? Do I have a favorite Star Wars species now?" And then I showed her a picture of Given, and she did not think they were cute. So I kind of ruined it for her.
Well, at least the joke was entertaining
Yeah.
enough.
So points for the joke. But was there? I
Which
guess. Sorry. Go ahead.
No, I was just gonna say, which, like, to be fair, I feel I haven't read any of this author's other, uh, any of his other novels or anything like that. But based on the fact that this is the only Star Wars novel that he's done, I take that as a sign that Lucas wasn't too impressed with it. Because this is one of the first story group novels, isn't it? Right when they established that.
Not really. Like the story group's always been around, or they'd been around for a
Well,
long
like, I'm
time. But
sorry,
like
when
the
Disney like reestablished it, and they were like, because
Well,
you, like you
I don't
said,
think the
this
story
is
group really changed between the buyout and what had been around before. It was one of the first ones that came out after the soft reboot, but I feel like the authors they went with afterwards were definitely different. But I don't know that it's necessarily because of any negative feelings about this book that he didn't get another one. There's a lot of authors from around that point that like some of the confusion from like switching over was probably impacting some of the publishing process. But I don't know if it just maybe it was a change in direction, but they tended to go with even less established authors afterwards. And I think Kevin Hearn had done a few of his own other novels. Like he was, I don't think like he's doesn't seem to have been as big a name as like Stackpole or whatever, but he had his own series going on. And a lot of the books that came out soon after tended to be far less established than that. But
I guess that's a fair point because the authors that were successful after that seem to continue working. Like Claudia Gray is still writing Star Wars novels at this point.
yeah, uh, yeah, I don't know. I have to look at the other books that came out around that time because there was like the James Luceno one. That was his last Star Wars book that came. No, because he did
Was
Rogue
that
One
Tarkin?
novelization. Yeah, Tarkin came
Oh
out,
yeah,
which was supposed to be
he did
a
Catalyst also.
yeah.
Yeah.
So I think it really was just a timing thing rather than a people really didn't like this book situation. I don't think it was a
Okay.
particularly popular book, but I don't think it was like negatively received. So because it's kind of like Scourge, where they're both in a similar period towards the end of the Legends run, except this came out like towards the start of the canon run, because it was over the course of the reboot. But we did kind of skip over a bit of Vex, but they really it's all of these little segments leading up to the end part are so short that it's hard to say there was much more going on there than like a skull borer came.
Yeah, that's pretty fair. I felt like there were so many like food related jokes where it was just
Yeah.
like, okay, I get it. You're having a lot of fun writing like Star Wars names into food. Just keep going.
Yeah, I do think there was some like some clever writing here. It's just with some of the jokes, it felt like the characters who were saying them wouldn't be the ones to say them. It's just they're kind of there for their own sake, which I don't hate. But it when I was already feeling questionable about Luke in the book, in a Luke book, like if you think about other Star Wars books that are like character studies, which this is almost trying to be with your traitors and your Jedi's, like I don't think this ends up stacking up quite as well to them. And it's kind of unfair to compare like character studies to in a Star Wars book to what Matthew Stover does because his are pretty much always the best, but it still felt like it was a bit lacking for me. And I think part of it is that it almost feels like a young reader novel or a young adult novel, just with the themes of like Luke getting like finding himself. It's finding yourself and then like a romance subplot where that's kind of the thing that separates a young adult novel from just a standard novel. It's not like it's easier or harder to read. It's just those themes get addressed a lot more, and then you have to kind of take it out of that. You have the skull borers and you have heads exploding when they get sniped. Like those kind of feel jarring because the rest of the book kind of feels like this young adult novel or young reader novel, and then the heads explode.
It's written that way too. A lot of the dialogue is very young reader. I felt. I don't know. I couldn't really enjoy the book because of that though. Where it was like a lot of the writing just seemed to not be as interesting as other
Mm-hmm.
books. Like you said, I expected it to kind of be a character study when I first read it. And based on the earlier parts, like the interesting parts to me is Luke learning about the Jedi, and it's such a small part of the book where I feel like they could have really expanded on that and had like one mission where they had Nakari and Luke going off, and maybe that would be their connection rather than the shared trauma of losing a parent to Vader.
Yeah. Like they do kind of use that to explore the dark side a little bit, and I do kind of like what's done with that there, where they're so sure, like with the conversation with Luke and Nakari, I think part of it is Luke being slightly. It seems like it's too soon for Luke to be in a position where he'd be like, "Oh, I could learn from Vader." I understand. I agree with where he's coming from. It's just the way he expresses it doesn't seem like the way that Luke would express it in the moment. Of like, I
Yeah,
could learn from him to see uh, what I could have. I feel like it should have been more. I could learn from him to see what went wrong for him and how I could avoid it, rather than like empathizing with him in the way that he seems to here. And because like
it's very
Nakari,
like post episode 5
yeah,
concept. Yeah,
yeah, like Nakari is like, no, he sucks. Kill him, he sucks, and he sucks, but also he's terrible, and we can never make those decisions. And I feel like Luke's reaction kind of takes away from what we get later on, where if Luke had been more like, I could never be in that position, Vader is just evil, and there's nothing that I could learn from him, then coming around to it more after Nakari's death of like, now I understand what Yoda meant by the dark side seducing you, where he was when Nakari gets blown up by the Aqualish with the grenade launcher, he's barely able to contain his rage, and he starts to understand more of like, okay, this is what or sorry, Ben, not Yoda. Uh this is what Ben was talking about. But he was kind of already in that position, so
yeah.
he didn't really grow as much
Especially
from that.
especially when his only exposure to Vader at this point is he saw him kill Ben. He knows he killed his father, and he nearly shot him down when he was about to blow up the Death Star. Like
Yeah.
he didn't have enough of a relationship. I don't know this. I guess if this is set after the comic run from around this era, then they did have a few interactions beforehand, but I do really like the idea, like you were talking about, how he was trying to figure out what it meant to be seduced by the dark side, because he only really has that brief little bit about what Ben was telling him. And I think you're right, where it should have been something that was explained towards the end of the novel rather than when it was, which I think is like the midway point, maybe a little beyond the midway point.
Yeah, like he's already telling Nakari that he's in the position that you'd expect him to be in after Nakari dies. Of like, now I understand how I can fall prey to this. Because like Luke, even in episode 5, like the I'll never join you thing, like he's coming at that from more of a like I can never fall for this situation than he has in say episode 6, where he understands he's susceptible to it when he's like hacking away at Vader because he's threatened Leia. And we kind of get a bit of that journey here that I wouldn't have a problem with it happening both here and with the episode 5 6 thing, because you don't learn a lesson once in your life. Like there's never any like self-improvement you're on. It's never like, oh, I know this about myself and now I'm just never gonna have that problem again. But the way he's talking about it, like he's already understanding it. So within the context of the book, it's going from point A to point A because he's already got it covered.
I really I agree with you, but also the rage he feels when Nakari dies, like he never really. I feel like the two of them, while they don't connect like through dialogue or through any kind of interaction that they have in the novel, it's also over a period of what, like a week, where he's already got these very strong romantic feelings, and I like the idea of that kind of becoming a part of his fascination with the dark side almost, where
Yeah.
it's you kind of get those hints of like the naive Anakin relationship with Padme.
Yeah, I think it is a fair bit longer than that, but like it doesn't really change your point too much. Or like I think they're even on just Kupo for a week or two. But
It's just a very high school
yeah,
mentality, which is I guess that's kind of the idea of Luke, is he is very naive to the broader world that isn't moisture farming at this point.
yeah. So they leave Vex. They've got their ship set up, uh, and they go to Pantora. Well, first they go to Pasher to get their money from her dad, and then they go to Pantora to meet back up with the fleet, talk to Leia and Akbar about their plans for the mission. And I think this is when Leia is kind of concerned about what's going on with Nakari, and it does kind of highlight this and the whole romantic subplot thing. It does kind of highlight one of the weirder parts of Star Wars novels from this period, where like Luke is clearly into Leia in Episode 4 and the start of Episode 5, and we know that you have to acknowledge it when you're doing a story in this period that is romance focused. But we also already know that Luke and Leia, Lucas decided were going to be siblings after all this had happened. And it
Yeah.
just makes the whole thing so uncomfortable. It's like I I don't want to read this tension between them, and I don't want to like the talk between like Nakari and Luke of like, you know, you're good enough for her. You're good for me. It's like, okay, you're talking about his sister. You guys don't know this, but I know this, and I'm reading this book.
Yeah. It would have been more I think if they would have made it a point to be like, I don't know, almost like Luke just kind of let it go at this point, because it's very clear that Luke knows that Leia is interested in Han.
Yeah,
I think they could have done something about that where it was like, "Oh yeah, I had a thing for her, but time passed," and they could have cut that off right here.
yeah, but they didn't. So yeah, we get to from Pantora. They go to, is it Exodine, where they come across the immobilizer. I don't have the name of the planet they were on in my notes because it's either Exodine
Uh,
when they're leaving or getting there. But
yes, it is
because I think
Exodine.
it's Nath3 that that they go
That's
through
where.
on the way out.
Yep.
Okay, yeah. So in Exodine, they find the immobilizer 418. Uh, and this is where we get some backstory on the immobilizer cruiser. We get some particle and energy shield talk. We get a neat little space battle before they jump away. But this breaks their engine. That's why they need to take up uh, the favor that they'd gotten from Sackett, where she's like, "Go here, talk about my noodles in space, and then someone from Kupo will help you." Which it's hard for me to read and look at the name Kupo because it just looks like Kobo from Jedi Survivor, but like the B is just falling over.
Yeah. No,
So
I got that. I started playing Jedi Survivor like seriously in the past week or so. So that's where my mind was
yeah,
the entire time.
yeah. So that was bothering me the whole time. I was like, not Kobo, Kupo, Kupo. But yeah. So Azur Nesson doesn't really want to help them because it's dangerous. They're fugitives. They've not been very quiet about any of this. But they're able to convince him like, look, we found a planet that will kill you. It's very epic. Now, do you want to fix our ship? He's like, how can I say no to that? Because I'm apparently interested in biotech now, despite that not seeming to be really what my business is about. So I'm gonna send a crew to this planet. Like these fucking billionaires. Like, thank
Hey,
God
they
this guy
needed
gets
to
shot
have
in
a
the head.
reason. They needed to have a reason for
Yeah,
that part being in the book earlier.
yeah. Like, thank God this guy gets shot in the head because he was going to send some of those employees to that planet. So, like, it makes sense that they'd betray him. Look, like, it's either tell the Empire that he's harboring the Jedi or get sent to a planet with something called a skull borer on it. He's not
I
going
just
there.
I just love the way that Luke was totally just willing to let that happen too.
Yeah,
He's
they
just like,
do not care about what
yeah.
happens to this dude or their employees.
Which also in the audiobook they give him a very thick French accent.
The Azurnesin?
Yes.
Hmm. Uh-huh.
Yeah, it was very I was like, "That's such a weird choice. I don't understand why they did that." But, it happens, and the entire time their entire conversation in the audiobook, which is read by Mark Thompson, who I think he does, like, a lot of the
Most of them,
Star
yeah.
Wars audiobooks. And I think most of his impressions are pretty good, but whenever he has to create a voice, it's always very hit or miss. This was a big miss with Azur Nesson.
I am going to make a new voice. Oh. Yeah, so they.
That happens in the audio.
Oh
Yes.
my god. Well, Drusel is very eager to get to her family at Amaranth, or Amaranth. I don't think there's an N, but I think I keep adding an N. But so they need their engine fixed after the escape from the immobilizer. They're taking a week or two. The employees betray them, but they hog tie him in Luke's hotel room, and it's very unclear what the time scale on this actually is.
Yeah. That's what was making me think it was only a couple of days because they were totally willing to just leave these two in the hotel room the entire time.
Yeah, but they also said they'd have free run of it and they'd have comfy beds. So it's did they
It's
actually
okay.
get untied? I don't know because they were tied back to back. But they do manage to escape the planet after Azur's head gets blown off, and they have to do some creative hyperspace lane development when this is going on. They're really making hyperspace lanes willy nilly throughout this book. Luke does it with R2. R2 seems to have like droid superpowers to be able to do it rather than just like plotting courses like a regular droid doing like small local jumps. But they do
Yeah,
manage to get through. Oh, sorry.
he leans on R2 quite a bit in this
Yeah.
book.
R2 is basically magical in
Yep.
but they get to Amaranth finally, and unfortunately there are bounty hunters who had followed Bren Derlin's Corellian Corvette and Drusel's family here. So rather than any of them helping Luke on the way in, they're all just on the ground. They'd probably lose on their own, but Bren is even like, yeah, we figured that you would handle these guys, so we just hung back. Like, no, Nakari's dead because no one helped in even like the ground battle. No one got into contact with anyone. You could have done something. You could have warned them, like broadcast something on the way in. Instead, now Luke, Nakari, and Drusel fight 6 bounty hunter ships worth of bounty hunters. Kill them all, but Nakari does explode. And we finish with Drusel reunited with her family, able to give the Rebel Alliance some communications codes and tell everyone what's going on with the Empire. So Luke has learned a lot about love. He's learned a lot about grenade launchers, and Drusel's with her family. So how emotionally did you feel at this point? Were you fulfilled?
No, I wasn't. I was like, I mean, like, I'm glad Jerusalem reunited with her family, but Luke just being like, "Hey, here's your daughter's body," and then taking off again is probably one of the funniest things that he does here.
Yeah,
It's so heartless, but I don't know. I they couldn't have really done much more with it.
yeah. Like Luke comes to terms with this so fast.
Yeah,
Like
it's like
he's
now I
basically
will never
still in the
think about it
battle
again.
of like I'm gonna remember the good times, and then the credits roll. But so I
I
mean,
think I think the last part of this book should have expanded out a little beyond the 2 chapters that it's contained in. I think they could have done a little bit more with the actual battle.
yeah, like I like the second half of the book a fair bit, but I do think the very ending felt a little compressed. Where like especially in a book that's supposed to be looking at how Luke feels about his place as a Jedi, uh, learning to use the Force, his romantic development, and it's just like, okay, that's done.
Yeah, it's very rushed at the end.
Yeah.
But like I think that builds into the idea where I feel like this was more than one book and they compressed every possible Star Wars idea they could into this one
Mhm.
book.
Well, maybe that's why they never did another one because they just didn't feel the need
Just
to.
like
They told the other
out of
stories already.
ideas. Yeah, yeah, that's fair. But I don't know. I don't really. I don't love this book, but I agree the interesting parts are intriguing enough, but it slogs in the middle so much.
Well,
And it's a bad beginning too.
if you had to put a letter grade on this book and your feelings for it, we have S tier is the best, A, B, C, D, and then F. Where are you?
I'd give I'd put it in D.
You're giving it a D?
Yeah.
I think for me, it's getting a C. It recovers enough in the second half, even if it doesn't handle everything super well. It's I think it's better than a lot of the ones that we put on D. I so I did enjoy the second half, but the first half I was really struggling to not keep putting it down. Like I read pretty fast, but I got to like page 10 and I was like, okay, I'm gonna put this down. Got to page 20 in the next session. I was like, okay, I'll get to the rest later. 30, then the next time it was like, okay, I got to page 60. And then once I got past that, I started getting more into it. But it was a little bit tough to get through. So I think C is where I'm putting it.
I think I did the same thing where I read the first 10 pages, put it down, and then I turned on the audiobook and listened to it at double speed. And then I picked it back up again when I felt like it was getting interesting.
Yeah. Yeah. So yeah, not my favorite, not my least favorite. Some cool ideas in there. Some interesting character interactions. I really like Drusil. Uh, but that is the heir to the Jedi.
Yeah.
Yeah. There you go, everyone.
Very mid book.
Yep. I believe Ilkin did use the words aggressively mid in the chat. So
Yeah.
speaking of that, so there will be 2 more episodes this month of the podcast where I am going to be away on the 3rd and the 10th of August. Or actually, no, not the 10th, just the 3rd of August. So I won't be able to do an episode then. Hopefully, we'll have Justin back for the 10th. I'll figure something out. If not, I have a few ideas for people to reach out to or books or topics to go over. But for the next 2 weeks, we're going to be going over some books that we've missed that have come out relatively recently. Ilkin will be joining the podcast once again for Convergence and Cataclysm, the 2 adult Phase 2 High Republic novels. So next week is Convergence. Next week Convergence. Week after that, Cataclysm. Ilkin will be joining for both. But thank you, Zack, for joining me for this novel. Thank you for picking it. I'm sure Justin is very happy that you picked this one for this week.
Thank you for having me on and refreshing my memory on this book.
All right, well, Zack and I will be playing some Empire at War with Charlie and presumably Ilkin over on youtube.com/Corey Loses, as well as youtube.com/X2, ECKSTOO. I wonder if can I redirect? I think I might be able to redirect. Do I have that enabled on this channel? I don't actually know if I do. But that's annoying. Either way, thank you for listening, everyone. Thank you for watching. Remember, get your convergences in for next week. Any questions you have about convergence as well. And see you then. Goodbye.
Bye.